I am Len Lodish, Vice Dean of Social Impact for the Wharton School. Bobby Turner is a Wharton graduate. He is also the founding partner and CEO of Canyon Capital Realty Advisors, and he's a managing partner of Canyon Capital Advisors, firms with over $20 billion in assets under management. Bobby oversees all of Canyon's real estate investment activities and has been a pioneer over the past decade in the area of triple bottom line investing. I personally am really in awe of Bobby's record of making very superior investment returns, investing and developing in urban real estate in areas that traditional developers pass over. It is really my great pleasure to introduce a person I really admire, Bobby Turner.
Well, first of all, thank you, Len, and wow, what a great turnout. Definitely better than my dream last night where only one person came. By the way, dream got worse. When Andre and I were done the lecture, as we were walking off the stage, the one individual looked at us and said, "Hey, Turner and Agassi, where do you think you're going?" I responded, "Well, why do you care?" They responded, "Well, I'm the next speaker, and if I listen to your speech, you should wait and listen to my speech." It was tough. So 25 years ago, I graduated from the Wharton School with a BS in finance, armed with the knowledge of how to create wealth. See, back then it seemed pretty simple to me that there was 4 ways to create wealth. And raise your hand if you fall into any of these categories. First and foremost, one can create wealth by inheritance. Not so much, me neither. Second way to create wealth would be marriage. Not so much. My wife, lovely lady, greatest deficit spender you'll ever meet. Not so good there. Third way is speculation. Buying low, selling high, buying low. At least in my 25 years, I have yet to meet anybody who can consistently speculate, so that's not where I make money. The fourth way is what we call value investing, which is basically taking the skills that those of you from Wharton learn here, how to scour the markets looking for opportunities that are misperceived, misassessed, or difficult to underwrite. Now, my father, who was a Wharton class of '57, always had this theory about creating wealth. He used to say to me that the first $1 million is the hardest to make. In fact, he would say the first $1 million is much harder than the second $1 million. So be smart. Take your education, go out and make the second $1 million first, and then come on back and make the first $1 million later. Much, much easier. So in '84, with my degree in hand and some good advice, off I went to Wall Street to pursue the creation of wealth, which, by the way, I always assumed would lead to happiness. Well, here I am 25 years later to let you know that there's absolutely zero correlation between wealth and happiness, and that one should be confused with wealth and happiness. What I can tell you is that anybody who thinks that money will make them happy hasn't got money. I know a lot of very wealthy people who are very, very unhappy. Fact is over the past 25 years, I've seen that, over the last 25 years, I've developed a theory that there's 4 steps on the ladder to create happiness. The first being materialism. And by the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying things that give you a sense of satisfaction. The counterfeit, of course, would be indulgence. But the fact is that the only thing guaranteed by material things is that you'll live a more comfortable form of misery. So that, again, materialism will not make you happy. Next on my ladder would be love and family. It is absolutely fantastic to have a family, to be loved, adored, belong to something. But the fact is that most of us, unless you inherited or married well, will spend 75% of their waking hours at work. So therefore, we cannot assume that we'll drive happiness from love or marriage. That brings us to the third step on my ladder, which would be self-respect or accomplishments. The satisfaction of a hard day's work, to have an opportunity to succeed, even to have an opportunity to fail, but just knowing that you did your very best. Now, of course, there's a counterfeit here to satisfaction and self-respect, and that would be status. Some people do believe that it's better to be envied than it is to be respected. I'm not a big fan. The final step on the ladder of happiness, I think, would be power. And not the power to control and not the power to manipulate, but the power to have a positive impact on society, what I like to call double bottom line investing. What you may have read is my wife Lauren and I have established a speaker series in the hope of accomplishing a number of things. First of all, we want to bring speakers to campus that are doing good socially and doing well financially. We want to bring speakers that might change the way you think about defining wealth, success, and happiness. We want to bring speakers that may open your eyes and minds to the possibility of careers where you can do both, create wealth and at the same time create happiness. Things I like to call double bottom line. And I, for one, have been very fortunate, as Len mentioned, over the last decade, working with Magic Johnson, who many of you may have seen last year as our inaugural speaker. We have raised over $2 billion of equity capital. We've done about $6 billion of development, and we've had amazing financial returns investing in densely populated, ethnically diverse communities. That said, and equally as important, we've generated 10,000 jobs. We have incrementally generated hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenues, and we've provided much-needed services and amenities into these communities, and that to us is as equally rewarding as financially. But truth be told, building affordable housing, building community-serving retail pales into comparison with a problem that we face in this country. And that's what brings us here tonight. So let's talk about our guests tonight. And let's start with a simple rhetorical question. And for those people at Wharton, if you're at Wharton, raise your hand. We're going to, maybe everybody, but see if you've got an FAS or a college student, because we're going to ask a rhetorical question, and I just want to make sure you all know what a rhetorical question is. What do you think that Andre Agassi is most proud of? A, $32 million in career earnings. Now that excludes endorsements, by the way. B, 8 Grand Slam titles. C, 60 single titles. D, an Olympic gold medal. E, a business card that says Mr. Steffi Graf. It's not back there yet. F, a New York Times best-selling autobiography. Or G, a K-12 charter school he built in the very worst neighborhood of Las Vegas, where 100% of his students graduate and are accepted to college. And thus, the rhetorical question. Well, let's find out what makes Mr. Agassi tick and why he's dedicating the next decade of his life to the building of hundreds of charter schools and providing tens of thousands of at-risk kids in underserved communities with the opportunity to succeed. So would you all join me in welcoming Mr. Andre Agassi to the stage? Are you okay? That's a hyper shit.
How are you? Wow. Wow.
What do you think?
Thank you. Well, I mean, first off, I just got to say that unlike all of you, based on the reaction, and unlike you, I was very successful at marrying wealth. And that's the smart thing. But I was good at that.
Let me give you a little context.
Yeah.
You're surrounded in this room by maybe 1,000 people that are incredibly well educated. I have to imagine that the average IQ is 300. The average GPA is 7. The average SAT score is 5,000. I don't know. You've got students from the Wharton School, the Moore School of Engineering, the Annenberg School. You've got probably some med students. You probably have some law students. You may have some tennis team members. Any tennis team members out there tonight?
All right. Shout out.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of money at tennis. Just keep working.
And while most of them here, particularly the Wharton kids here tonight, are black belts at the idea of wealth creation, financial wealth, I think the vast majority of people are here tonight to learn about how to pursue happiness, how to pursue the true definition of success, and what you've managed to accomplish over the last decade and a half of your life since you graduated from the University of Tennis. So let's start, if we can, with Open. Show of hands, anybody read the book Open? Okay. So you write this book. And on the very first page, you say, I hate tennis. Help me with that.
How many people hate school? I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, putting your life's work into 400 pages. I don't think any man's life fits really inside 400 pages, but when you set about to do that, it's interesting because you have to take a real honest look at yourself, and we all know our experiences that we live in our lives and the things that we've done and experienced, but I'm not terribly convinced that we all really, especially after I wrote the book, take the time to understand just how important it is to connect those experiences and to truly understand what has formed who we are and how we have become who we are. And as a result, what choices we're going to make moving forward. And the thing that I had to really come to terms with was something I lived every day with. I lived with a real angst about what it is I did. And I found myself in some pretty low places in my life. And so I start writing this book, and I start recalling all these experiences. And I think, like most of us, so much goes back to who our father was, how we were raised, what our environment was. To be great at anything, I think you do need a level of nature for sure. You have to be born with something special, unique. But then, to a large degree, it also has to be nurtured. And nurture is the word that has many interpretations. My father is convinced he nurtured me. I would suggest probably the same, but I would do it a little bit differently with my kids. My father was an immigrant from Iran. He was a boxer, boxed in 2 Olympics, won 2 Golden Gloves. He was a fighter by nature. His mother, as a punishment to him, used to make him wear hand-me-down girls' clothing to school, and that's where he learned to fight. A Christian Armenian growing up in a Muslim Tehran, and he put that formal training to use, became a boxer, and then his brother got him out of Iran, thank God. But when he came to America, he had the American dream in his mind. That was what he wanted for himself and what he wanted for his family. And the American dream, tennis was really his vehicle and his quickest road to the American dream. So we had a lot of rules in our house growing up, one of which was wake up, play tennis, brush your teeth. And in that order, make no bones about it. My father hand-built a tennis court in the backyard in a desert where I grew up in Las Vegas, and I watched what tennis did. I was a baby of 4, so I watched what tennis did to our family. I watched what it did to my siblings and their relationship with my father, and I never liked it. I never liked how it felt that winning or losing could be so important that it can actually impact who you are as a family. And he would take this bits and pieces from all these different ball machines, and he would construct his one main ball machine. And this main ball machine that he would construct, we would start our day off every day hitting against. And I refer to it in my book. For those that haven't read it, I refer to it as the dragon because it's how it appeared to me. It was this monstrosity of this machine that had this huge motor and engine, and he put this aluminum tubing, barely enough for a tennis ball to get through, and this suction would take down this tennis ball, and it kind of make this gurgling sound as it dropped into the ball machine's belly, and then it would get pulled up this aluminum tube where it could barely fit, and every component of this would have these intersections where the air would just continually build up until finally, with this aluminum tube, would extend out almost like the neck of a dragon, and finally the thing would just release like with vicious power. It was the only ball machine at the time that could hit the ball about 110 miles an hour, and this thing would just kind of recoil, a bit like if you ever saw Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, Augustus Gloop, who gets stuck in the pipe, right? So he would stand behind me, put me against this baseline. He'd make me face this dragon every day for thousands and thousands and thousands of balls. And I think my hate for tennis probably started right about there. But that was quickly followed up with 13 years old sending me away to a tennis academy, a military. I call it a glorified military academy. It was a prison camp. No adult supervision, teenagers raising each other. I resented tennis taking away my childhood. I resented being abandoned, being sent to this place. I had to survive and competed against a lot of other kids my age, and you would be rewarded by where you were in that pecking order. just another affirmation of winning and losing having such dramatic impact in your life. And I resented that, so I started to rebel. And I rebelled a lot of ways. I rebelled by piercing my body. I rebelled by painting my body. I rebelled by, drugs and all sorts of I just became an ass is basically what I became, and quickly realized that, if I were to really want to get out of here, I have to actually do the unthinkable. I have to succeed. I have to learn how to win. I have to learn how to get out of here, and then that's what I did.
And Andre, where do you find that motivation? Something that you hate so passionately, but yet you succeeded. Where does that motivation come from?
Well, in the beginning, it was fear. It was straight fear for me. I took this childhood rebellion, this teenage rebellion, and then I started to rebel on a world stage. But it also gave me so much that I never had. I mean, tennis gave me my family's life. Allowed me to do things for my father, for my mother, my siblings. So at the same time that it was costing, it had so much cost to it, it was also doing so much for me. But I then started to resent being labeled, being told who I was, being told who I wasn't. And I always said, you can't tell me that that's who I am or that's who I'm not, because I don't even know who I am. And here I am trying to discover that. So when I started to stick all these things in my life together, I quickly had to admit to myself that I spent most of my life hating what it is I did. And it really wasn't until I took ownership of my life.
So let's talk about that. You start off early success, #1 ranking in the world. Yeah. And then somehow you lose your way, you drop to number 150 in the world. You end up playing exhibition matches for thousands of dollars. Then you have a historic comeback. You win all the Grand Slams, you go back to #1 ranking. You described in your book your lowest point of having lost your inspiration. Where does one dig? Where does one find and recoup and motivate yourself to coming back to being the best in the world? Where do you find that inspiration?
It's not easy to do, and I can assure you it's a lot harder the second time. But I had been #1 in the world in 1995, is when I was 25 years old. I'd won 3 Grand Slams, tens of millions of dollars. And I found myself very uninspired. I found myself waking up in a life that I didn't choose. I found myself in a marriage I didn't want to be in. I found myself depressed, disconnected with the very life that I was living, because I never found reason for what it is that I did. And I remember sitting in a hotel room at 141 in the world, after I'd fallen from #1 in the world, with my coach. I'd taken a wild card to this tournament in Stuttgart, Germany. A wild card is when you're an up-and-comer, it's a good thing. When you're a has-been, it's embarrassing. You'd been #1 in the world, now you're begging for tournaments to let you play, as opposed to have really earned your spot, and you're taking that spot from somebody else. So I took that rather seriously, and I went out there and I got my butt kicked first round, and we go back to the hotel room, and my coach looks at me and he locks the door behind me and opens up the mini bar and pulls out a couple beers and hands me one of them. And when my coach, Brad, who's an interesting character, drinks German beer without bitching about it, you know that something serious is up. And he said to me, "We're not leaving this room tonight till we decide what it is we're going to do, because you can't go on like this. You've been too much, you are too much, you're way better than this. So tonight we're going to quit or we're going to change everything." And it was one of those epiphany moments for me that evening, because I never hated tennis more than I had hated it at that moment. I had been to the top, and I'm 141. I found myself in this marriage I didn't want to be in. I was just in a horrible place. And I remember looking out the window of this room in Stuttgart, Germany, at all these cars and the traffic, and I thought to myself, how many people out there actually don't like what it is they do? That are actually going somewhere they don't want to go for something they don't want to do, but they found a reason to do what it is they do. They're taking care of somebody that they need to take care of. Maybe that's the answer for me. At that moment, I actually, for the first time in my life, gave myself the permission to quit. I said, you know what? I'm not going to play for my dad anymore. I'm not going to play for monetary reasons anymore. I finally actually completely gave myself the permission to quit. And the second I did that, I then said to myself, what if I now choose it for me? And I choose it for my reasons. And what would those reasons be? And a flood of memories through my life came through my mind. And that was the day that I thought to myself, I am going to give children what it is I never had. I always felt the lack of education in my life. And I said, maybe I can actually, for the first time, because I always thought it'd be better on a team sport. You know, I always thought it's lonely. Tennis is a lonely, lonely experience. You know, it's only you out there. You can't hide behind the helmet. You can't call timeout. You can't pass the ball. I always thought if there was just some way I could have a team, I'd be so much better off. And then it occurred to me that night in the hotel room that I can have a team. I can build my team. I can work for my team. And I set about building the Andre Agassi College Preparatory Academy. And that became my team. That became my reason for caring, for being connected with my life. I had already achieved success, but I hadn't achieved being content. I hadn't achieved joy. I hadn't achieved being connected to my life.
And can we talk about that for a second? Because it's ironic to me. I mean, you and I have traveled the last year pursuing a mutually shared passion to provide inner-city underserved kids with a chance to succeed. And you've always said, I've heard you say a dozen times, the two most difficult years of school for you were 8th grade. And it's so peculiar that what made you then, after not having had a formal education, find that that was going to be your passion? What drove you there?
I knew I wanted to make a difference. I was helping kids at the same time where I was going through this epiphany. I was helping children. I was clothing about 6,000 children a year with my own money. I had built a Boys and Girls Club after-school programs. I built a shelter for abused, abandoned, neglected kids. I enjoyed giving. You know, we heard something today that Bobby, and a few of our meetings that we've had here, that we both found fascinating, which is the whole idea of giving back. What does giving back mean? Does it mean that suggests that you've taken something? You know, giving back. It's giving that's really the joy. It's doing it for yourself. And I was doing that. I was giving. But I always found myself late to the party. Here I am reacting to all these children's problems, sticking Band-Aids on real issues, never being ahead of the curve, always reacting instead of being proactive. And I thought to myself, the only way to really make systemic change is to give the tools. That's when you can have a ripple effect that is immeasurable. I mean, to educate, to give those tools. That's what led me to education. I knew nothing about it, but I was always up for a good challenge. And if there's any challenge in life, try fixing our educational system. It's not an easy one.
Well, you know, Brad Gilbert said to you, in order for you to win, you had to avoid perfection. And again, we've spent the last year, and you are a perfectionist. So how do you avoid winning? How do you win being a perfectionist, knowing that the task you're taking on today to build thousands of schools for hundreds of thousands of school kids, the daunting political polarization of this issue, how do you avoid becoming a perfectionist and not failing?
Well, first of all, you don't avoid it. You understand who you are, and you deal with those strengths and those weaknesses. And with every strength comes those weaknesses. And I am a perfectionist. I am one that'll never be satisfied. You know, I don't know if that made me good at tennis or if tennis instilled that in me. But in tennis, you don't have to be good. You don't have to be great. You just got to figure out a way to be better than one person. It's really what you have to do. And that's what you're spending all this time, this tennis team in this little section over here, figuring out, is you really don't have to be good. You got to problem solve. You got to figure out how you can be better than one person, which means you're never good enough, to be quite honest, because there's always tomorrow and there's always somebody else. So you become, I was number one in the world, went to 141, and went back up to number one. And what I can say about both ends of the spectrum is the same motivation applies that's sustaining in both of those environments. When you're number one in the world, it is objective. You are number one. There's nobody else to look to. You are the standard. If if the universe had a tennis tournament, right, Earth would say, "You're our guy," right? It's surreal, right? When you think about it, it's like, what the hell does this really mean? It means so the question becomes, how do you get better when there's nothing to measure yourself by? And you quickly conclude that this isn't about what my ranking is. This isn't about how much money I'm making. This isn't about, I'm number one. This is about, how do I make myself better? That's what the challenge and the journey becomes about. Now, when you're 141 in the world, the hardest part about getting back to number one, it's so much different than the first time. Because the first time, you're going along for the ride. And you don't know what to expect. You don't know what you're in for. And so therefore, you take every day, one day at a time, and take the good, the bad, whatever it may be. But when you've been there and now you have to go back, the thing that you're constantly hit with and aware of is exactly where it is that you're not. Every step along the way, you realize just how far you have to go. You can't live naively anymore. And at 141 in the world, climbing back, always being aware of where you're not, you see this mountain, you think to yourself, how am I ever going to accomplish this? I don't know how I'm ever going to accomplish this. And then you quickly conclude the very same thing you learned at number one in the world, which is, this isn't about being one or 141. This is about knowing that absolutely under no uncertain terms I can make myself better today than I was yesterday. That I can be better tomorrow than I am today. That's the very lesson I learned at being number one. It's the very lesson I learned at being 141. And if you think life in between is about getting to any destination, you're in for a rude awakening. Because in between all your plans and in between all these places you want to get to and achieve, it's actually happening now. So your life is happening now. So there's much more at stake than you realize all the time. So is that a perfectionist? Yeah, I would say so, because I never stop. I mean, we have done some incredible things together over the last year, and you would have to attest that I'm no more or less excited than I was the first day, because we had so much ahead of us. Although we've accomplished a lot, we have so much ahead of us. So it's a mindset that I have that I use for my advantage, which is every day is an opportunity to make myself better, to make myself smarter, to make myself more prepared, to make myself a better son, a better brother, a better husband, a better father. It's for you to lose.
You once said to me when we were playing tennis, or you were playing tennis, I was just sort of admiring from the other side of the court, that the most important point is always the next point. Let's digress for 1 second and talk about your school, what you've accomplished over the last 13 years, the kids, and if you could talk about some of the lessons you've learned, some of your accomplishments, and then some of the failures maybe that you've had, and how that maybe led to our relationship and how our paths met.
Yeah, well, my school, I started in about the year 2000 when it opened. We've had our first couple graduating classes, so we've graduated 2, so it's K through 12. One of the first mistakes I ever made was the first decision I made, which was to start my school in 3rd grade. I said, I did a lot of homework. I talked to Michael Feinberg from the KIP program, Knowledge is Power program. And Michael said to me something interesting, which is where my perfectionism really hurt me. He said to me, if you try to reach a kid in 5th grade, it's like a 2-minute drill in football. You can march the field and you can score, and you're gonna succeed a lot. You will have a lot of successes. If you try to reach a kid in 6th grade, it's like a Hail Mary into the end zone, and you'll lose every single one. So I took my perfectionism and says, well, let's try to be perfect, and let's save all the kids that need it the most. So let's start with 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And let's save those kids who are on the verge, that were on the verge of losing. That was mistake number 1. And it was the first decision, because you spend all your time trying to bring these children up to speed that you're not pushing them as much as you possibly can. So I went into urgency mode, and I ended up building K1 and 2 real quickly and got myself into about $40 million worth of debt in doing so. But at the same time, I knew that we were really affecting lives, and every day these kids were getting a day better. So Nevada is 50th in kids that we put into college. I know you think you have it pretty rough here in Philly, but I tell you, we're the worst in the country, kids we put into college. We're 48th in the United States in our per pupil allocation. We fund at about $6,200 per student, when the national average is probably a lot closer to $9,500. You know, we lead in high school dropout. We lead in teen pregnancy. We lead in all of the wrong stats. So what I said I wanted to do really was to raise a bunch of resources, give a bunch of resources, have real transparency and control and accountability with those resources, and provide that opportunity with the children that society has been so quick to write off. And those children are in the poorest neighborhood of Las Vegas. They're there, and that's where I built my school. Come 10, 11 years later, those same children that everybody said you shouldn't spend your time caring about have all graduated. We've had 2 graduating classes, and 100% are on to university and to a life of their choosing. So that is something that has really impacted me. But what's impacted me more than the privilege of being able to give that education to those kids has been not the 650 kids we're helping in my school, but the over 1,000 of kids that are on the waiting list to get into my school. I would see this line every day, and I don't know how many of you have watched Waiting for Superman, but it is something that I live every day. So over the last number of years, I've been trying to figure out a way to scale what it is we're doing in Las Vegas, in this little poor neighborhood in Las Vegas. And I've tried it through legislation. I tried to make substantive change legislatively that might trickle into our public education system, that might create a level of change for a broader group of kids. Doesn't work. So many agendas, and it's very naive to think it's going to get accomplished there. Replication was what I considered. I found a lot of great people, especially out in the Northeast, that wanted to build what I did in Las Vegas. Out here, if I would just do what I'm doing in Las Vegas, and I quickly realized that I'm a 9th grade dropout and I'm not an operator. I mean, that's not what I do. I don't operate schools. I've figured out a way to put the right people in place to run my school, and I facilitated that school for those children. I facilitate the teachers for those children, but I myself am not an educator. I myself don't operate. So if I can't change scalability through legislative or replication, I started to quickly realize that philanthropy itself is not scalable. Because I'll clue you all in to when philanthropy stops. Philanthropy stops when philanthropists run out of money. That's when it stops. I've been a philanthropist my whole life, and I know I can't give if I don't have. I'm so grateful for what I do have to give. But just when I lost hope that there is a way to scale this, we get introduced. And Bobby brings to the table his experiences, what he's learned in taking areas that are traditionally governmental or social. Or
it was a good first date, wasn't it?
It was pretty good, I got to say. And we have absolutely figured out a model to broaden our reach by going to traditional capital, and currently, as a result, have about $150 million to deploy in building best-in-class charter schools for the best-in-class charter school operators across this country. A couple reasons why I can't go into specifics of the model is, number one, all you people are smart, and I don't want any of you stealing it. Secondly, there would be some SEC regulations against it, but I've figured out how to take what it is I've given my life towards and turn it into something that will not only continue to provide for me so I can provide for others, but will have literally significant change socially across this country in a very powerful way.
And we can talk about the fact that as we've gotten to know each other, we share a common theme in the sense that we tend not to bask in our glories, but rather we dwell on our failures. And while Andre, over the last decade, has built a K-12 school that educates 650 kids a year, when we first met, the first thing he said to me was, "I'm a failure." I said, "Riddle me that, Batman. How could you consider yourself a failure?" And I think your response was, "Well, I've got 1,000 kids on my wait list that I can't help. And what can I do to help them?" From my perspective, with the help of Wharton grad Glenn Pierce, who's in the audience tonight, over the last 5 years on a non-for-profit, we built 38 schools in Los Angeles in the worst neighborhoods. We've built 15,000 school seats for the neediest kids. And we, after every board meeting, feel that we're failures because there's 38,000 children on the wait list in Los Angeles alone. And that gets compounded. Mm-hmm. So one of the wonderful things about the relationship with Andre is that we share a passion on solving a challenge that the vast majority of people believe is the responsibility of philanthropy or public spending. And unfortunately, when the economy or when the country is in desperate need of probably 5,000 to 10,000 environmentally friendly, learning friendly new schools, with budgetary crisis, with people feeling less wealthy today than they ever have, it's impossible to assume that we can rely upon philanthropy and or public works to build the schools. Let's talk about what's been more difficult. Has it been more difficult to win 8 Grand Slams, or has it been more difficult to raise a fund focused on something that is what I consider to be incredibly politically polarizing? And we'll talk about the fact that over the last year, Andre and I have probably visited no fewer than, 500 potential investors. And how would you group those investors?
Yeah, it's been a real education, no question, because you spend half your time educating people on what a charter school is, the need and the importance of education. It's sad but true. You actually have to educate people on how important our future is, silly as that sounds. But it's also the other half of it is an education myself, because I've learned how limited people are in their vision and how narrow they are in their perspective and how significant their own particular agendas are. There's been 3 sort of classes of investor. There's been 4 really. The 4th are those that are actually involved with us. 3 would be what we categorize as the unionist, the communist, and the capitalist.
And maybe I'll take the unionist, and you'll take the communist and maybe the capitalist, sure, without mentioning names?
Yes.
So in my business, of the $20 billion that we manage, a large percentage is we invest on behalf of a number of teacher pension funds, teachers' unions. And it was a fascinating experience when we walked into a teachers' union and said, "We want to talk to you about a really compelling investment opportunity to make money and at the same time have a positive impact on society." And we were also smart enough to realize that if you pitched and you went out there and led with the word charter school, you'd probably have the door hit you in the ass pretty quickly. So what we would do is we would sit down with the unionists and we'd go through the fundamental compelling issues and compelling fundamental investment fundamentals of why you would want to invest in this fund. And in reality, our job is not to try to create demand. We talked about the ways to create wealth. One of them is speculation. And speculation is when you try to create demand, particularly in the real estate industry. If you go out and you build a shopping center and hope people will come, that's called speculating. If you go into an inner city and you build a shopping center where there's a huge pent-up demand, that's called value investing. When we sat down with the unions, we would talk about the huge mismatch between supply and demand of this kind of asset, the fact that this industry was growing at 15% per annum, the fact that there was public support, the fact that there was government-backed, the fact that it would improve the health of the country, because we tried to lead these investors thinking maybe it was health care, And by the end of the presentation, we had these pension funds very, very interested in investing in the fund. But throughout our presentation, they would say, what's the asset class? What's the asset class? And we would say, well, we can't tell you yet. Please hold judgment. And at the very end of the presentation, 9 times out of 10, the investors would say, we're very interested. We'll commit to this fund. You've done great by us in the past. And when we announced that the asset class was charter schools, what was the term of art?
It was...
Go service yourself?
I believe it was it was 4 letters.
Four letters.
That was anatomically not possible.
It begins with F, ends with UCK, and it's not fire truck. And so we found very quickly that the public pension funds viewed charter schools as the devil, as the nemesis, because every time you created a charter school job, they felt that it was the expense of a union job. And it's, by the way, not the case. But so those are the unionists, so we could not go to our traditional investor base, the public pension funds or unions.
Yeah, so then you look at the communists, and we met with the senior deputy of CIC, China Investment Corporation.
But you can't mention them by name.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's all of China. I mean, it's not one person. It's the whole country. You know, we're sitting down there and we're discussing it, and they got it and they bought into it and agreed on how important it was and quickly said, we're in. You know, count us in for you know, X% of your fund. And I just asked out of curiosity, why would China be interested in an alternative educational you know, fund in America? And the guy looked at me, and I'll never forget this, and he said to me, you know, Mr. Agassi, with all disrespect intended, you owe our country close to $1 trillion, and nobody here at this table will live to see that get paid back. We need your children to do so, and you're failing to educate your children. So
we didn't find it funny.
Yeah. So we're hedging against our investment in you because, you know, we got to do it because you can't do it yourself. That's basically what he was saying. And I don't know, found it offensive but very illuminating. So we set out to now do it without them, not mentioning them by name. And then the capitalist who says, we love what you're doing, we'll take the whole thing, but we just want to tweak it a little bit because in our model it's very important to us that we create wealth, that we give these operators a chance to own as opposed to just rent, because you'll never get wealthy renting. So they offered to take up the whole fund with one tweak of the business model, which is don't give the opportunity for the operator to buy back the facility, take all X amount of schools and roll them up, and we'll go REIT and we'll take it public, and we're leaving a lot of scraps on the table. And it's like, well, hold on a second. The idea of what we're doing is not to make money. This has to make money in order for it to scale and work. Our idea is to create real success for everybody here, especially our children. And unless this works in perpetuity, unless this is self-sustaining, it defeats the whole purpose. All we're doing is burdening the system even more. So it's been a real education, talking to different perspectives. And then you've had the others who have said, we get it, and we're there, and count us in. And as a result, we have the chance of doing some real spectacular things.
Are there any people who are majoring in real estate finance? Would you raise your hand? Oh, I guess the real estate recession has really impacted people's choices. Okay, so this joke will fall pretty flat then. Well, we've introduced a concept with our vehicle called the Benevolent Landlord. It's sort of an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a benevolent landlord. But I think what we found with the capitalists is that our job is truly the double bottom line thesis. Our job is to create wealth for institutional investors, but also to create change in the charter school environment. The only way to do that is to empower the schools themselves to create wealth. And as Andre mentioned, no one's ever gotten rich paying rent other than the landlord. And if a charter school, for the perpetuity of a 30-year hold of a piece of real estate, is paying rent, they're not creating wealth. But if they're paying a mortgage over 30 years, with every mortgage payment, they're creating wealth. And that is the basis of why the fund works. At one point in your book, you talk about in 2006, was probably one of the most difficult, cantankerous events of your life, career matches. And what you talked a lot about was the preparation for the match, because you knew it was going to be a knockdown, WWF SmackDown sort of event. The preparation that you had for that match, does it translate in preparation for the things you're doing today? Talk about how you prepare, what thought you put into it, and how is that translated into what we're doing today?
Yeah. Well, you know, tennis is a sport that teaches you so many life skills because, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's problem solving at its finest. You don't have to be good. You got to figure out how to be better than somebody. So there's that level of problem solving. But the truth in any industry in life and anything is that there are three major components, right? There is your preparation, there is the given action, the given swing, the given execution, the given reality check. Is this working? Is this not working? And then there's what do I do with that information, and do I allow that to make me better or not? We have the ability to control two sides of that equation. We have the ability to absolutely control our preparation, and we have the ability to control how we deal with the results. The others we can't control. And in tennis it was this way. There was just so much you couldn't control. I always obsessed about the things I could control. And my trainer had a great saying to me that I'll never forget. 19 years I had him. He said to me, "It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it." And that meant everything. That meant practice. That meant fluids. I'd go through 10, 11 liters of water 24 hours before I'd play, because the last thing I want to do is be left needing more fluid when I could have controlled that. When I stepped into the 2006 U.S. Open for my last tournament, I don't know how you ever really prepare for the end. I don't know if anybody's ever really thought about that. You're probably too young to be faced with any realities of ends of any kind. But I was faced with the end because it was my last tournament. But it wasn't on this day it's going to end. That would have made it a lot easier to say it's over today, so get ready, brace yourself, today's execution day, and you're done, and you're off into the abyss, which is this life after tennis that you know nothing about and have no idea what it's going to feel like or be like. It's a death of sorts. It was more cruel than that, because in tennis it may be your last day, you just don't know it. And what you have to do is you have to ignore the 23,000 people in the process of figuring out, are you about to die or are you not about to die? And that's a real difficult thing to prepare for. And I stepped out for what I consider to be my last match. It wasn't technically my last match because it was the last match I won, but it's the last match I really lived. The last match where I couldn't even stand and walk when I played. I just kind of took it all in because I physically couldn't do it. But the match before, I'm going out for a night match at the U.S. Open against Marcos Baghdadis. And here I was getting my feet taped up before the match, this pre-match ritual I would go through where every callus would be cushioned, and I'd have all these strips of tape that would just basically blend into my skin. And I was preparing the dogs for war, and these dogs have years on them, and they have miles on them, and thousands of miles, and my opponent is over there, like a girl or some boys, I guess, do with their ponytails, where they pull them to tighten, and he's doing that with his hair, right? He has his headband on in a mirror, and he's like pebbles, from the Flintstones or something. And I'm going, geez, that's a bit more glamorous of a pre-match routine than me having to take care of every square inch of my feet just to be able to go through this. And I go out in the court against this 22-year-old, and I start battling it out, and I get up 2 sets, and he starts fighting back, and the crowd is louder than I've ever heard them. It's like we're at a concert sitting in front of a speaker, and we get into a 5th set. We've been out there for hours upon hours upon hours, and just beating each other into a bloodbath. And I remember being late in the 5th set, and he hits a ball when I was just about to get over the line to hold serve. He hits a ball for a winner that I kind of lunged towards, and when I did, my back completely seized up on me. I felt it. It just absolutely grabbed me, And I remember thinking, God, that's one thing you don't want to have happen when you're playing tennis, is you don't want anything to happen so suddenly that your opponent takes notice, because the second they take notice, there's weakness. And the second there's weakness, you just handed over the rights for him to believe that he should beat you. And it's like a staring contest. And if you just start to see somebody get fidgety, you know they're about to blink. So I found myself in this moment where I stretched and I did something and I went, oh! And I remember I kind of froze, and I remember thinking, God, did he see that? Because I'm this close to getting over the finish line. And I look across the net, and I realized he hadn't seen it because he was busy going like this. He had, when he had hit this shot, his entire leg started cramping. Now, I don't know how many of you have, I know we all sort of have these cramps where, oh, at nighttime, maybe my calf cramps, or I flexed too long in the mirror or something, and you know. But when you cramp because you're utterly and completely depleted, it is one of the most horrific experiences of your life, because the only way to relieve a cramp is to stretch it. But just, you know, action, reaction. Problem is every muscle in your body has an opposite muscle that does the opposite thing. So if my quad cramps and I start to stretch my quad, then my hamstring cramps. And if I start to stretch my hamstring, then my quad cramps. And then you get so stressed out that things are cramping, more things start to cramp. And it gets pretty ugly. So here I am with my back not being able to move. He's cramping. We're crawling over the finish line. Neither one of us knows who's going to beat who. And I get through the match, and I win the match. And I couldn't even carry this tells you all the things you think about when you're out there in competition. I can't carry my bag because the weight of the bag on the shoulder is contorting my back in a way that is absolutely excruciating. But I carry it off the court because I don't want my next opponent to be watching the match and see me not carry my bag off the court, because that's just maybe in a day's time I can be ready to go again. I have no idea. And I start walking off the court, and as soon as I get in the tunnel, I drop my bag. And my walk is turning into a crawl, and I get to the training room, and I can't get on the table, and my coaches ask me, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm telling them, you know, I don't know, I can't breathe. My back was constricting so much that it was actually pulling my rib cage into my diaphragm, and I was having a hard time getting oxygen. And it was scaring the shit out of me, to be quite frank, that I couldn't get on this table. So here they were lifting me onto this table. The trainers on the bed of ice, they lay me on this. There's a few training tables in this room, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning in Arthur Ashe Stadium. 2 o'clock in the morning, here I am, not being able to breathe, asking to get a doctor in. They're trying to rush to get a doctor. And then here comes my opponent, who's being carried. And as he's being carried, he's starting to cramp in really bizarre places. And every time they try to deal with one, something else cramps, and they lay him on the table, and he is slowly like morphing into this fetal position. And
you're feeling good about that at this point.
Well, you know, I'm only noticing because of how bad I feel. I'm going, you know, at least I'm not the only one. You know, so he's lying on this table next to me, all cramped up. I'm lying there, not being able to breathe. We're both begging people just to leave us be, and they all leave the room, and it's just me and him. 2 o'clock in the morning, Arthur Ashe Stadium, and above us, if life isn't cruel enough, there's this TV, and on this TV is a replay of what we just been through. And I'm looking at it going, it was almost over tonight. I'm dying. I'm not dying. I'm physically actually dying now. I'm not. I got to come back and play again. And here they are showing everything I just kind of lived through, we had lived through. And it was amazing. Out the corner of my eye, I see this little movement, you know, and I kind of look, and my opponent managed to unclench his cramping body just enough to reach out his hand. And I just remember in this reaching out, grabbing my opponent's hand, and we're sitting there holding hands. He's cramping. I can't breathe. I feel like I'm going to die. I'm on the verge of not doing something I've only known my entire life. watching the replay as if it's a different person. And I'm thinking to myself, you ask about preparation, to take a long-winded way to get back to it. How do you ever fucking prepare for that? You can't prepare for it. So the answer becomes, well, yes, you can. You can prepare your whole life for that. You can prepare your entire life. Today you are preparing yourself for things you'll never believe you're in for. You'll be so amazed that you'll find yourself on the doorstep of being able to change the world. You know, being able to do unbelievable things. But every day is that preparation. So you ask me about how important preparation is and how it's helped me in what we're doing now. I'll tell you, preparation is at least half the equation. I'll take somebody who works hard, somebody who's prepared, over somebody who's talented, over somebody who's been gifted. I'll take the person that's willing to work hard over that person any day of the week, on a tennis court or off a tennis court. And if you happen to be talented, which I got to believe, being here, most of you have already proven that, you control that other side, and it's an unfair advantage on the world. And how it specifically applies to us today is my capacity for sheer pain, which we've experienced a lot of together, is unparalleled.
I was like Brad Gilbert. I was Andre's coach, and I had to prepare him for the art of war and fundraising. And I said, Andre, look at me. And he would look at me, and I'd say, you ready? He goes, yes. I said, ask me if I'll invest. Go ahead, ask me.
Will you invest?
No. Try it again.
How about if we just...
Stupid idea.
Well, what if I...
Not interested.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on now.
Failure. Is that a concept that exists in your life? I mean, when we talk about the endeavor we're on now, we can't afford to fail. Is that something that you worry about?
Don't ever trust somebody that doesn't tell you that they don't fear. Fear is okay. Fear is okay. I do worry. I worry we're going to fail, and I worry about the implications that has. That we set back our movement decades because we do the wrong thing, or we expand with the wrong partners, or as a result we have more unproductive schools doing the same thing over again. So you have to fear. If you're not scared of failing, you don't care enough about it to be involved. So go do something else with your time. Fear of failure is everything. It allows you to know you care. You know, I learned that from my coach Brad Gilbert, who taught me in such simplistic terms. It was 1999. I was coming off being ranked 141 in the world. I was now probably, 13, 14 in the world, climbing slowly at this point. I was 60 days removed off a divorce in my life. I was playing at the French Open, a tournament I didn't even want to go play, and he told me, well, unless you play, you can't win. He talked me into going into this tournament because I was 29 years old. Most players are retired by then. And I was going, this is my worst surface. I'm 29 years old. This tournament eluded me from 1990 and 91. So it was the first Grand Slam I could have won. In tennis, there's 4 majors: Australian, U.S., Wimbledon, and the French. I had won the other 3. I hadn't won this one. So it's the end all for me. It's the moment. To win all 4 is what matters most historically in our game. Everybody has given up opportunities to win multiple slams in order to prepare to win the one they haven't. So here I was in this tournament, and I find myself all the way in the finals. At 29 years old, 60 days removed after divorce, coming back from 141 in the world, and now my dreams yet again are just right in front of me. I can almost touch it. I was so scared I could hardly even move. I literally got on the tennis court, and I couldn't. I thought I was moving. The ball looked like a BB. I mean, when you're in the zone in sports, or you're in the zone in anything, things slow down, your mind quiets, everything else is working fast except your mind. I mean, the ball was like a BB out there. and I couldn't control it. 57 minutes later, I'm down 6-1, 6-2. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm blowing the only opportunity I'm ever going to have to ever do the one thing that's all I ever wanted to do. And by a sheer miracle of God or some outer force, clouds come in and it starts to rain. And it interrupts this dialogue of fear that I have going in my mind. And I leave the court and go in the locker room. Not many of you probably have been in a Grand Slam tennis locker room. But when you spent the last 2-3 weeks of your life, 1 week leading up to it, in that locker room with 128 other guys from all over the globe, speaking all sorts of languages, with clay that's on the floor, clay that's on the lockers, the smell is so, you don't even want to know about the smell in these places. The difference between that first day, being in there, to being on a rain delay in the finals where there's just 2 of you, and the janitors and the people responsible for cleaning up have nothing else to do. They're just on break because there's nothing to clean up anymore. It is one of the most bizarre environments in the world because you've just lived it. Now you're in the middle of this match, which is your life, and it's pitch quiet, except for your opponent that's on the other side of the locker room. So I'm in this moment feeling like I'm blowing the greatest opportunity that I'll ever see again. And my coach, Brad, comes walking in, and it's a lot of metal lockers and hard floors. And there's one thing that's really endearing about Brad is he never shuts up. The guy talks and talks and talks and talks. And it helps me in a lot of cases because it distracts me. He comes into this locker room, and he's saying nothing. And I'm sitting there thinking my life is falling apart in front of my eyes. And I look up at him in this pitch quiet locker room. And I just go, really? Like, now you're going to finally shut up? I'm down 2 sets to nothing, and my dreams are... And I still remember he took the locker that was there and he slammed it as hard as he could. The thing kept bouncing back and forth. He didn't give a rat's ass that my opponent was on the other side of the locker room and could hear every word he said. He says, what is it that you want me to say to you right now? You want me to tell you that this guy is actually better than you? You want me to tell you that you're actually that player that you just were for the last 57 minutes when I've seen you for 13 days go out there and lay it on the line and execute and bring your game and hit your shots and play on your terms and go down your way? Is that what you want me to tell you, that somehow magically it's all different today? He goes, let me help you out. If this is all so complicated, let me simplify. If the guy hits it to your backhand, hit it back to his backhand. If the ball's like over there, run. And hit the damn ball. He goes, you're so scared of yourself right now, you can't even get out of your own way. I understand that you're scared, but you got to do this on your terms. You got to hit your shots. You got to do what you've done for the last 13 days, and you've spent a lifetime preparing for this. So don't give me any excuses. There's nothing for me to say to you. You get out there and do what it is you know how to do. And I still remember that moment where fear was really getting the best of me. I walked back out on that court, and I was convinced I was just going to lose a different way. No question about it. But I found myself settling in a little bit in the third set. 4-all, I'm down break point. The guy's maybe he's going to serve for the match. I hold serve. We switch sides. It's 5-4, I'm up. And it occurred to me in 90 seconds on a changeover that just what if I happen to play 4 good points right now? If I play 4 good points, I've won a set. All of a sudden, the pressure's on him going into the 4th set. If he doesn't close me out in 4, we're going 5. And I just come back from 2 sets to love. So all of a sudden, life can turn on a dime just like that. And I played some of the 4 best points of the match, broke his serve, won the set, settled into some of the best tennis I've ever played in my life in the 4th set, earned the 4th set, got into a 5th set, got up the break, got up 5-3, he's serving 3-5 double match point. I'm one swing away from my dreams, from my life, from never, ever again having another regret as it relates to what I have experienced on the tennis court. And he snuffs those 2 out. I get another break point. He snuffs that one out with a big serve. He ends up holding serve. Now I'm serving for the French Open title, the last of the 4 Grand Slams, coming back from where I've been, depressed, using drugs, in a marriage I didn't want to be, in a divorce I wish never happened. And I'm switching sides, and the same damn thought occurred to me, which is, I was just 1 point away. What if now this guy plays 4 points? All I've done is raise the stakes on failure. And all I've done, and then I kept recalling Brad's words in that locker room about not letting fear paralyze you, about using it. It means you care. Go down on your terms. If you're going to go out, it's going to be the way you're going to go out. And I remember thinking, oh, that's it. I'm doing what he says. I'm going to the well. Here's my plan. I started to control everything I could control. I could control where I'm going to hit the serve. I could control what kind of risk I was going to take, how aggressive I was going to be. I started to get back to the very basics. All of a sudden, serving for the French Open title, I was reminded about being at the Challenger at 140 in the world. I was reminded about the hours in the gym. I was reminded about everything I had done to prepare for this moment and how to face that fear and how to use that fear. Controlled what I could. And I remember when there's this great picture. I'm serving for this match. I'm at 40-15 now, one serve away. And I still want to find this picture because it's just a great shot, and it symbolizes, I think, so much of what I experienced with my personal relationship with Brad, but also this particular moment. I served my opponent's forehand. And in tennis, the most important thing you can do after you serve is to get out and get back and get ready. I mean, so you don't even spend any time watching your serve. You hit your serve, you know way too well where that ball's going to go, and all you need to do is, as fast as you can, get yourself ready to defend or get offensive, depending on what happens. So I hit this serve, and you finish the serve, and you finish down like this, and now you start pushing yourself back to get behind the baseline. And there's this picture where I'm still pushing myself back. The ball has left my opponent's strings, and he's staring at the ball like he just made contact with it. I'm pushing myself back, focused on the ball, and there's this outside picture from a distance, like a 5,000 square foot, 5,000 high perspective, and there's one person, my coach Brad, who's doing this. He's like, I'm not kidding you. That picture doesn't say it all. He was the first person to know that I won the French Open, and he was the first person to know. But he deserved to be the first one to know because he taught me how to not ignore my fear, but use it. So am I scared? Yes. I've spent my whole life being scared.
Let's ask one or two before we open it up to the students to ask some questions. Let's talk about balance for the moment, because obviously you've had your ups, you've had your downs, and you seem to have found a nice sense of balance. And you talked about being in the zone. And as I've gotten to know you, I've seen you in the zone in 3 places. And when we say in the zone, it's where you are embracing life, where I've never seen you happier. One was as a spectator when I watched you win your championships. You had that look, that aura about you of being in the zone. That's place 1. Place 2, where I've seen you being in the zone, is when you walk the halls of your school, and the kids all walk up to you very politely and high-five you and say, "High five, Mr. Agassi, high five, Andre." And I watch the joy and the accomplishment that you feel from the success you've had by changing these lives. And the third area where I've seen you in the zone is with your family, with Steph, with Jaden, and with Jazz. And I think that we learn from history that we don't learn from history. And the question is, as a parent now, which none of us ever thought we'd be, as you look at how your father parented you, how are you taking what you learned from your father's parenting differently as you approach your kids? I know that Jazz and Jaden are taking tennis lessons. Are you encouraging that? You called the other day, and I was talking to you on the phone. You said, I got to go. Jazz is taking her tennis lesson. I'm thinking, okay, who's going to teach Andre Agassi, Steffi Graf's kid tennis? I mean, where's the upside there for that instructor?
You know, that's part of the fun of it, though. It's like, you know, we have an instructor we use. I still remember the first few lessons. He was about to tell Jazz something, and Jazz is, you know, 4 years old at the time, and he wants to tell her. There's nothing you're telling a child. You're just letting them do what they're going to do out there. And he would start to say something, and he'd look at us like, is that the right thing to say? And, but I'm not encouraging them to play tennis, no question about it. Matter of fact, it'd be really difficult for me. I have to nurture what they choose for themselves because it is their life. And if they chose tennis, I would take a big, deep breath. And the reason why I would is because I think in life you want to experience it with people. You don't ever want to be ahead. I don't want to know their journey so intimately that I anticipate where they are and where they're not. It's like being 140 in the world and looking up at number 1, and you're just going, you know what it means the second time around. You know how difficult it is, and as a parent, I don't know if I have the heart to be that to them, to know that, and to actually experience it. So I want to experience life with them. I'd rather be surprised with them. I'd rather feel the joys and pains alongside what it is they feel. But what the hell was your question again?
It was leading.
No, because I
what are you doing differently? What did you learn from your father as parenting?
So the thing that
do you want to invest?
I have short-term memory issues. The thing about parenting, and I'm assuming most of you aren't here, but that you'll realize is you always heard children to change your life. Here's what I can say. You'll have a hard time remembering what you cared about. I'm not going to say you won't know what you thought about, or you won't know what you were working on, or that somehow this time isn't greatly important. You'll just forget what you really cared about because they occupy so much of everything you are and everything you do. But the question that you have to really figure out in parenting that I've experienced on two ends of the spectrum now, being raised and also raising children, is the first decision you make is the most important, which is how am I going to define success for myself? How am I going to define success for my children? That is the question you have to answer. And if you answer that wrong, or you answer that separate from what you really believe, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle a lot. My father was very clear on how he defined success. And it was how he saw it, and is how he sees it. When the book came out, I called him, and I said, Dad, you told me you weren't going to read my book. And he says, of course I'm not going to read your book. I was there. What the hell do I need to read your book for? And I said, okay. I said, but I'm sure you're going to hear things, and I just want to know, are you doing okay with what you're hearing, or do you want to hear my perspective on it because you're not reading the book and you're hearing other people's perspective on my perspective, which is probably not very close to the mark. And he says, listen, I'm 80 years old. He goes, I don't need to hear nothing. He goes, I know exactly what I've done. I know exactly why I've done it. And I know what I would do again if I could do it all over. And I said, wow, I wasn't expecting this, but now that we're on the subject, what would you do differently? Right? And he says to me, I wouldn't let you play tennis. And I went, okay, so you'd control me some other way? What's the deal here? He says, golf or baseball? And I said, okay, now I'm slightly less fascinated. You've appeased my anticipation, but just for the sake of just entertainment, why golf or baseball? And he says, well, because you can play longer and you can make more money. So he is very clear in life, and as a result, doesn't appear to have a great deal of regret as to what he imposed and how he saw things. So I'm not judging morally what somebody should or shouldn't value. What I'm saying is just make sure that what it is you value is the first thing you define as it relates to success for you or your child. Because then at least you'll be at peace, even if ignorance is bliss. For me, my children, and my priority for them is empathy. It's really what I want. It's really how I will define success for myself as a parent and how I will define success for my children and their lives. If they have the ability to see life through other people's lenses, they are fully equipped to meet life's challenges on any stage, in any environment. in any boardroom, in any fund pitch, and on any court, if you can see your circumstances and the circumstances around you through other people's lens, you can navigate all the landmines that exist. And for me, that's what I hope for them.
You know, Steffi said to me that before she was ready to have kids, she had to accept and embrace the fact that children are the gift they keep on taking. And when you're okay with that, it makes them magnificent. So one, you talked about, you know, how you define success. Just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that in the last month, Andre Agassi has been inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
I say that because you saw Andre's response, because I truly believe that Andre doesn't define his success on the tennis court, and that how you will define your success is by having sex. I know.
I love you too.
How you define, hang on. How you define success will be you would like to be inducted into the International Hall of Societal Change. And I think that we together, and you in particular, are well on your way there.
Well, you know, I know you're just about to close there and open it up, but let me just make one quick point about that, which is tennis was always a vehicle for me to impact people's lives. It was always that. That was my connection. My connection to the sport was to take 2 hours of your day that you needed to take from your day for whatever your reasons were, and to provide you with something else, to give you, whether it's an escape, to give you an adventure, to give you the joys and the pains. And I apologize for half of the things I put you through, but that was what it did for me. And I always saw my school, and now more profoundly and more importantly, I see what it is that we're doing together, Bobby, is just a fantastic way to not just impact a lot of people for a short period of time, but to impact less people generationally. I just think the difference between going vertical in people's lives versus horizontal is profound. And in tennis, I could go horizontal. A lot of people think they know me because I did something for them for a few hours. But I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in fewer people knowing what I'm trying to do for them. And that's what this has given me.
All right, well, first of all, before we open it up, I want to personally thank you for being our speaker this year. It meant a great deal to me. And I consider you a very dear friend for life and a partner, and looking forward to many years of success changing other people's lives. If we could turn the lights up, maybe we could, there should be a queue, there should be a microphone on each side of the aisle for those who want to ask Andre some questions. We'll open it up for about 15 minutes. Should be microphones midway. Does anybody, the mic's right there if anyone has any questions.
Or you could just talk loud. It's a pretty intimate environment.
Any hands, any questions? We answered? Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Chol Young, a senior here at Penn. My mother just loves Mr. Agassi because you're just handsome player. So she loves you so much that she made me play tennis from when I was 4 years old. So I used to go to tennis court at 6 a.m. in the morning in Korea. Very hard time, but now she's changed her dream to make me very rich so that she could build a school in Cambodia. So that's why I changed my major from tennis to business and finance. My question is addressed to both of you guys. I want to build up on what Bob said at the beginning of the speech about the 4 letters, starting from materialism to love and family, to the feeling of achievement, to the social impact. My question is, what comes after the 4th letter? Is there any way that go up higher? And like alongside with that, what's your thought about what you're planning to do going forward? And what do you think about of your life when you're looking back at it at the bed when you're about to demise.
Should we dim the lights again and start all over?
Wow.
Yes,
No, and I don't know.
Right.
No. I'll let.
You take this
Yeah,
one.
I'll take it. So.
Zoom Schwartz, it's yours.
There's the four things that Bobby mentioned were certainly important and the utmost priority or scale. Is there anything more? I don't know. Those were sort of Bobby's four evolutions of growth and connectivity in his own life and for what he's gone through. I mean, what I can say as far as me and looking forward, I will hopefully never ever look back. I don't understand it. It doesn't register with me. It is if I have time to look back, that means there's time I'm not spending being proactive and doing what I'm doing. So for me, the joy in life is that pioneering. When I'm at my school, I don't look around and say, "Geez, look what I've accomplished," or "Look what." I look at these kids as to what I can do more for them. It's always a forward sort of thinking thing for me. So I can't honestly say I'll ever really look back. And I don't know if that's a strength or a weakness. It's probably a lot of both. But it's also my mindset. Bobby mentioned the most important point being the next one. To me, the most important impact you can have is the next interaction you have, which is why your question kind of makes me spin a little bit, because I'm trying to care about your question, but we probably don't have the time.
Let's head over here to this gentleman in the. Is that a burgundy?
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Red burgundy.
You got a lot of pressure on you now. Rise above your shirt. No.
Yeah. Well, first, Andre, as a French tennis fan, I wanted to thank you for the wonderful match at Roland Garros, especially the heartbreaks of '89 and '90, but also the highs in '99 against Medvedev. I think it was awesome, and I think all of us are very happy about those games. I wanted to get your perspective on how you approach, investing in education, and especially when you look at students who maybe come from a family that's kind of challenging. Usually, you impact the school environment for them, but how do you take care about the parental involvement? And that's a big component of their success. And I was wondering how you take that into account in your approach.
Sure. Well, I think that it's a great question, because a child going home to an environment that doesn't understand what it is they've been aspiring or nurturing towards their entire day is a real problem. One way we address that with my charter school is through mandating parental involvement. A lot of times it's just a function of the parent understanding what their child has the opportunity to do. In a lot of cases they don't even understand it. But the thing that has been very impressive to me has been all these parents that are maybe single parents holding down 2 jobs, how motivated they are to make the time to sign off on homework assignments, to read to their children, to put volunteer hours into the school, once they understand what the opportunity is that their child is having. When I talk about loving your child, I really mean it's profound. More than seeing these parents that are from dysfunctional homes, more than that, which there's a lot of that, I see parents who are so motivated to go the extra mile just so their child can have what it is they never had. So we do have teaching programs when they do come to help them be better equipped to help their children. But overall, being able to mandate their involvement gets them over the hump. It's one of the luxuries of working outside the traditional public school educational system, is that you can hold teachers accountable, you can hold students accountable, and you can hold parents accountable. And in all cases, they need to be held to high expectations.
Let's take one from over here. A couple more questions.
Hi, Andre. My name's Vic Challa. We actually had the privilege of meeting when you came to watch Zach Gilbert and I play in a North Coast section match, and I remember.
I'm sorry, was I an asshole or no?
No, you were great actually, and You were cheering for him more than me, so, you know. I remember, though, the few minutes we had with you, you began talking about how your intensity changed between your first really successful career run and your second. I'm wondering if you could spend a few moments and expand on maybe what the sources of that change were and how you felt it changed.
I was just making that shit up then. That's
Oh, really? Okay.
Next question.
The difference of success is when you actually have ownership of your own life and you actually choose it for your own reasons. You know, the difference between me pre-27 and post-27 is me understanding myself and what makes me tick. So the second I built my school, or planned on building my school, I felt like I built a team around me, something I was connected to, but that was still much larger than me. So it allowed me to get out of my own way. So those days that were hard to get up and train, those days that were hard to compete, those days where there was those trials and tribulations, I always had reason. And that was what connected me to my life. So true success for me was the difference between being connected to my life and not being connected. And the connecting piece was what we're all here for tonight, is understand that it's not about the millions, it's not about the trophies, it's not about the trophy case. It's about how you connect and make change. And for me, it was just that.
Next question over here.
My name is Robert. Growing up in a tennis family, everyone told me I had to follow you sort of as a role model on the tennis court. But I think what's been more significant now after reading your autobiography last year is the role model you've placed to me as a person. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on being, for people who play tennis and just in general, the idea of being a role model. You're the role model for the students at your school. You're a role model for many athletes. Knowing what you've been through, both the ups and the downs and the decisions you've made, the pressure that places on you because of the various forms of roles that you take.
Well, being a role model is like the scoreboard. It's a byproduct. Don't try to be a role model. Just try to make yourself better. You know, live the life. Don't pretend it. Don't try to emulate it. Don't act it. Try to make yourself better every day. You just might look up at the end of a match when you put every point, one after another, game after game, set after set, hour after hour. You look up at the end and you look at that scoreboard, and that scoreboard's going to say you either did or you didn't, which gets you right back to what it is you have control over, because you don't have control over that scoreboard. There's way too many factors at work. So don't spend your time worried about all the riffraff, all the byproducts. Spend your time with doing the very thing that you can do. That would be my suggestion. Roll up your sleeves, start right now, make yourself more of who it is you want to be, and don't allow yourself to not get one day better. And don't be stupid enough to try to make yourself 2 days better in one day, because that doesn't work either. You got to build that momentum in your life, and then you're going to look up, and one day somebody is going to tell you, you know, you're my role model, and you're going to go, I'm not sure. Okay, thanks. I don't know what to say to that, except the fact that what means more to me than being your role model or anybody's role model is to actually do more. Is to actually do more. So if there's anything I would impart, I would say spend your energy not thinking about the scoreboard, not thinking about being a role model. Spend your energy on what can you do to take a step forward today towards who it is you want yourself to be. And there are tangible ways to put your arms around every one of those steps.
So we'll take 2 more questions, and then Jane, do we want to, at the end of 2 questions? Over here?
It's like a tennis match. I'm just going back.
Isn't that great?
Hi, Andre.
Hang on, could someone in the back stand up and go like this? Just to make Andre feel at home.
I wanted to thank you so much for joining us here today. But something that I took note of during your sharing of your experiences was that you talked about low points and high points throughout your journey, but there was no mention of whether or not you may have regretted something, or you took it as something that just comes naturally throughout the journey of arriving at where you are now. Would you be able to elaborate on whether you think it's worth ever looking back and thinking that shouldn't have happened, I could have done something better, or if you think that it's just supposed to happen?
Well, no, I don't believe in some mystical, it's just that's the way it's supposed to be. For me, you know, my wife taught me this. She says, think about something long enough to understand it. Then the longer you spend thinking about it, the less time you spend doing it. And that's what she was always so great at, and still is. And that's where she brings me back to center in that respect. Because do I have regrets? I regret so many things. Would I change anything? I would change everything. I would change nothing. It's almost impossible to answer that with a concrete answer. But what I can tell you, only think about something, only reflect on something enough to understand it. Once you understand it, then spend your time doing something about it. So, yes, I regret a lot, and in other cases, what I've regretted has made me who I am. So it's not really here or there. But looking back is important only so you understand what took place. And I do that on such an hourly basis. You know, it's literally, in some cases, it's an hourly basis that I don't have these broad look-backs. I regret not saying the right thing. Sometimes I regret saying the wrong thing. Sometimes I regret something I should have said. But overall, it's just enough time for me to then say, now I can change that, and I can change tomorrow. Only look back to know where you're going to go.
So let's take one final question from this gentleman, as long as it's a multiple choice or it's a yes or no question.
Sure. Very quick. Hi, my name's David, and I'd like to reiterate everyone's thanks to Mr. Agassi for coming here today. I basically just got two very quick questions. My first one is, what is the most memorable win of your career? And secondly, and again, feel free to answer this very briefly, is it important to you to make concrete long-term plans, or do you prefer to plan much more in the short term and set yourself short-term goals?
My greatest win ever was the day my wife said yes.
That's a good answer. Wow.
I can get the tape.
We'll send that clip to Steffi. That was mad good.
You absolutely should have long-term goals. I absolutely believe in long-term goals, but you have to take bite-sized pieces. You have to, like, you ever see those Survivor Men or Man vs. Wild, and you're in the forest and you're fighting, and you know kind of what direction you're going. You have a game plan. Then you deal with all your stuff, and every now and then pop your head up and make sure you're sort of heading in that same direction. And that's kind of how I approach it. I'm in the battle every day, and every now and then I just peek ahead and make sure that I'm heading towards the person and the place that I set out for.
I think before we thank Andre, I think the Wharton School would like to present Andre with a little thank you.
Yeah, Andre and Bobby, on behalf of the student body, we would like to thank you for a very educational and very entertaining afternoon. We really appreciate your generosity with your resources, with your time, and most of all with your example in inspiring us to live more fulfilling lives. And for that, we would like to give you a vase.
Thank you. Should we hold it above your head?
Very nice.
That is nice.
Thank you.
Jane?
Thank you.
Hang on.
Wow.
I always wanted to do this against Andre Agassi. Hold it up.
That is a vase for like one flower, but it's a vase.
It's good.
Thank you.
So if everyone would join me in thanking Andre Agassi for his time.